What's going on, everybody? It's Brandon, and welcome back to another episode of Marotta Media. And today I thought I would try something a little bit different. As you can see, new angle. Still trying to find my footing here on YouTube. But I wanted to try something new for this review in particular because I did something over the weekend that I don't normally do. This past weekend, a buddy and I did a dual feature. We saw two movies back to back at the theater, and I wanted to talk about them both. So today I will be doing my first ever dual review. And the first movie that I saw of our double feature was the musical biopic Blinded by the Light. Blinded by the Light tells the story of a young man named Javed. He is a teenager living in England with his Pakistani family in 1987, and throughout the course of the movie we get to know Javed as he finds his voice with the help of the music of Bruce Springsteen. I saw a lot of marketing for this movie leading up to it, and I thought it looked interesting, but I wasn't really sure if it would appeal to me personally, because I'm not much of a Bruce Springsteen fan. But this movie was getting really good reviews, and some of my friends even personally reached out to me and said, "You have to watch this movie, it's so good." And I'm really happy to sit here today and tell you that they were not wrong, because I really enjoyed Blinded by the Light. And I think what I loved most about this movie is that it had this message of music being an escape from the real world. And that's definitely something that I can relate to, because when I was growing up, I wasn't the most popular kid in school, and I had bullies, and I really felt like I didn't have many friends in the world. So one of the few outlets that I had was music, and I felt almost as if the music and the artists of the music that I was listening to understood me and understood the situations that I was going through. And these are the exact same problems that Javed is going through in this film. And he deals with a multitude of different things, whether it be racism, bullies, sticking with what his family wants him to do rather than finding his own path. And the only person in the world who truly understands who he is Bruce Springsteen. And this is all greatly serviced by the fact that Javed himself is a phenomenal character. I really loved his character arc, and he was such a well-written and very relatable guy. At the beginning, he's this loner who feels that the world doesn't really understand him, but as we get to know him, he becomes more confident and carefree. And one of the ways that his happiness is conveyed is through the music of Springsteen. Because this movie isn't a musical, but there are several scenes throughout where some of the characters just break out into song as if it was a musical. And I thought this was a really interesting turn of events, because I didn't expect there to be scenes like this. I thought it would have a bigger sense of realism, because in musicals, when characters break out into song, it's not very realistic, but you kind of just turn your brain off because you're like, oh, this is a musical. But in Blinded by the Light, I thought these scenes worked so well because it's almost as if the characters are just so clueless on how to express themselves. They just want to sing how they're feeling. And I gotta tell you, just throughout these scenes, I found myself smiling so much. I just felt very happy while I was watching this movie. However, it is not perfect, so now I'm going to get into a couple things that I didn't quite like about Blinded by the Light. Javed has a love interest, and I thought their relationship was just very underdeveloped. Like, it's never really explicitly said that Javed has a crush on this girl or she has a crush on him. He kind of just notices her and takes a liking to her. The relationship as a whole just didn't really feel necessary to the story for me, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And some of the other characters kind of disappear for long periods of time. Several characters come and go when they are needed in the story, and so they could appear for a good amount of time and then they'll disappear for maybe a half hour, and then when they come back you're like, oh right, you're here, I totally forgot you were even here. And the last thing that I really didn't like, and this is such a minor thing, there's a montage sequence toward the end of the movie that's told through photographs, and in these photographs the characters are posing with a background of a building or something behind them, and for some reason these photos were green screen, like the background was all green screen. And I thought it was a really strange choice because I didn't quite understand why they didn't just go to those locations and film the montage in those actual locations. I mean, I guess I understand to an extent green screen was maybe just cheaper, but it didn't look very good, and it was honestly pretty distracting. But overall, guys, I really did enjoy Blinded by the Light. A very charming story with a fantastic script and a great lead character. And this truly is just a feel-good movie. I felt very happy as I was walking out of the theater. And I think this is definitely a movie that I will be buying on Blu-ray when it comes out. And overall, I would give Blinded by the Light an 8 out of 10. And as I did mention, this is a dual review, so the second movie that I saw after Blinded by the Light was Ready or Not. And Ready or Not is about a young woman named Grace who's marrying into a very rich family who earn their fortune through board games. And in order to be fully welcomed into the family, Grace must partake in a very deadly game of hide and seek where she must hide until morning while her in-laws search for her and try to kill her. And I hadn't heard of this movie until fairly recently. I really loved the concept to Ready or Not because it just seemed very entertaining. Thankfully, it was. This movie is a lot of fun. The scenes when the family is looking for Grace are pretty suspenseful and you're kind of just waiting for something to happen. And when something does happen, it usually ends in pretty hilarious ways. And that's something that I really loved about Ready or Not was its humor, because the scenes that have humor in them are just insane. Because the humor in this movie is very dark because it's paired with the violence that happens, and the violence in Ready or Not is pretty gruesome. Because there are several scenes in this movie where a character dies and the other characters don't really react to it. They kind of just throw their hands up and they're like, well, shit. What are you gonna do? And there's one scene in particular where one of the servants of the house is killed by being shot in the mouth with a crossbow. And while some of the family members are talking, she's still alive and in excruciating pain on the floor. So she begins to moan out loud in pain and interrupting the characters while they're speaking. And one of them gets very annoyed by her and just hacks her head off with an axe. And it's so incredibly bloody, but it's just hilarious to me. I don't know, I really like dark humor. I guess that tells you what kind of person I am. These moments kind of remind me of the scene in Pulp Fiction where John Travolta accidentally shoots Marvin in the face. It's like, oh shit, I just shot Marvin in the face. I didn't mean to. Yeah, that's basically what these death scenes are like. And one of the highlights of Ready or Not was the main character of Grace, who was played fantastically by Samara Weaving. No, that isn't Margot Robbie. I even got into an argument with one of my friends whether it was Samara Weaving or Margot Robbie, because he swore on his mother's life that was Margot Robbie in the lead role. But I mean, hey, if you're gonna look like anybody, that's definitely not a bad person to look like. But she was great in this movie. She was hilarious, she was badass, and she was just an overall joy to watch. And something else I really enjoyed here was the production design. The mansion that this whole movie takes place in is gorgeous. I really love the dim orange lighting of the mansion because it gives this ambiance and mysteriousness to the family. Because we're basically just thrown into this whole movie. It picks up right when they're about to get married. There is a flashback sequence at the beginning, but right after that, we're right at the wedding. So we pretty much know just as much as Grace does, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I really love that it didn't take the approach of spoon-feeding the audience the entire plot right in the first few minutes. We learn everything that Grace learns as we go along. However, something that I wasn't quite crazy about here was the cinematography. If I remember correctly, this movie was shot entirely through handheld camera, and I personally am not against handheld camera work, because there is a time and a place for it, and there is definitely a time and place for it in this movie. There are several intense chase sequences where the shaky cam is just perfect and there's no other way you can do it. But there are other times when the mood is just really calm and a character could just be meandering through the hallway and the camera is so shaky. It was so disorienting and it just made my head hurt. I felt if they took the time to truly plan out these shots, then we could have gotten some pretty gorgeous cinematography, because like I said, this mansion is stunning, so we could have gotten some very memorable shots here, but we really didn't get that. Another thing that I didn't quite like, without getting into spoilers, is the family's motivation for killing Grace. And as I mentioned, we learn why they want to kill her as the movie goes along, but it's never really delved deeper into. And the family does mention if they don't kill her by the morning, there will be consequences, but it's never quite explained why or how these consequences happen. But that being said, the ending to this movie is pretty freaking hilarious. And something else I wanted to touch on is a pretty common criticism that people were talking about with this movie. It seems that a lot of people didn't quite like the approach of Grace running away from these characters all throughout, rather than fighting them head on, because the family in this movie is truly a bunch of idiots. Like, you could tell they don't have any experience with hunting or killing a person at all. So yes, they are very incompetent, but I don't think that it would have made a whole lot of sense if this whole family was a ragtag group of trained killers. Like, I don't know, I just don't think it would have made much sense if they trained all through their lives just for this one night. I mean, they even say themselves in the movie that this hide-and-seek game isn't usually chosen by the new family member hardly ever. While I do think the concept of Grace fighting them would have been really entertaining, I think they went down the right path here, because the incompetence of this family really adds to Grace's survival rate, and it also adds for a lot of really funny moments. But other than that, I really enjoyed Ready or Not. It's a great concept, it's very entertaining, I was never really bored throughout. It does have a few shortcomings, like its predictability and the distracting shaky cam, but this movie is a very good time and something that I could definitely see myself watching again. And overall, I would give Ready or Not a 7 out of 10. Guys, thank you so much for watching my dual review of Blinded by the Light and Ready or Not. Did you guys see either of these movies? If you did, tell me what you thought about them. Comment down below. If you like this review, be sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. If you haven't seen my past reviews, I'll link those right over here. And other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day, and I will see you guys next time.